Hello and welcome to episode 5 of FPL Waffle. In this episode, we're going to obviously review how I did last week, future transfer plans, and some tips for you guys as to which players you should consider bringing into your teams. So, without further ado, let's share the old screen and get up the team that I had for this last game week, which scored a whopping 38 points. Now, to be honest, it was one of those weeks that obviously wasn't amazing. A lot of people struggled. I think a lot of people it felt worse than for me because they wild carded out a load of Liverpool players and then happened to smash it with a 7-0 win against United, which no one expected. So I didn't have that sort of level of pain, but I did still carry some pain. Matoma really was the saving grace of my week, along with Edison and a Haaland assist, which, everyone's got that, right? So it was only really Edison and Matoma that delivered for me this week. The Madison transfer didn't pay off, unfortunately, so far. He crossed one into the box that was headed against the bar on the last kick of the game, so I could have had a return there. I could argue that I had McAllister on my mind. Like last week's video, you could see my number one Brighton pick that I suggested was McAllister. So I was quite pleased that I predicted that accurately. He scored 14 points, and I predicted Matoma was our second best asset, who got 13. And obviously, I predicted Tony is Brentford's best asset, which I think everyone would say, to be honest. And he obviously scored for Brentford. So my video last week, my predictions were fairly reasonable. I said March for me is the third out of the Brighton ones, which was proven last week on last week's performance. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see what happens with the Brighton boys going forward. But anyways, that's the score I got. An 11-point Danny Ward on the bench. I wasn't too fussed about. Like I was never going to play him. And Edison still got the 7. So all in all, it's a 38 pointer. It was a reasonable red arrow. I'm down to 146k. So I'm hoping to try and get a green arrow this week, but we'll have to see how it goes. I won't have as many doublers as the wildcarders, so I'm going to be relying very much on potentially a Matoma captaincy coming through. I'm going to be relying on the likes of Henry and Mbomo as sort of semi-differentials coming through. I'm happy with the team. I mean, I think the team looks very solid. Don't get me wrong, but I don't have Tony. As it stands, I don't have an additional Brighton player, which a lot of people are going to be having. I don't have Salah against, I think it's Bournemouth. So there's so many potentially good point scoring players this week. And it's really just going to depend on which ones of those flop and which ones of those bang. And I've just got to hope that I have more of them that smash it than, yeah, perhaps some of my rivals in the overall rankings. So that's how my team's currently looking. Transfer plans as it stands. I was originally just thinking we'll just play it safe. We'll play a straightforward one. I've got one free transfer, and I was thinking let's just go Edison to Steele. And again, this is where the FPL team comes in nicely. So again, if you guys, I'd recommend going on here to have a brief look at your future moves to have an idea as to what could be good going forward. So to save me a load of hits, if this week I just did Edison out to Jason Steele, assuming Steele is now nailed for Brighton, or at least in the short term, this is how my team would look for this game week. Now, live news in terms of my team. One player I'm a bit concerned about is Varane. I'm really happy with him at home to Southampton if he plays, but seeing him on the lineup tonight against Betis in the Europa League does concern me a tad because there's a very real chance that Maguire comes in and gives him a rest. So, yeah, he's one player I'm a bit concerned about if I was to go over this plan now. So it's kind of put a bit of a spanner in the works as to what I'm thinking. But let's say I stuck with this. This would be my team for this week. Happy with the doublers, the single game weekers, my captaincy Matoma. No problems with that. Happy with those players on the bench. Fine. Next week, that would then leave me with a team that has, I believe, 10 playing players with a free transfer. So if you've done the maths, providing there's no injuries, I can use one free transfer, which as it stands would probably be Haaland to Ollie Watkins, who a lot of people are going to be looking at for this game week at home to Bournemouth. I've got 11 players there to pull out. I may even captain the Watkins himself. And then going into 29, I would have a fair amount of doublers. In fact, I think I would have enough doublers to fill out a whole 11. And with my one free transfer, I could do, say, Odegaard to a Jared Bowen, who I'm eyeing up for West Ham, providing they can sort out their form after Brighton just smashed them, hammered them, should I say, 4-0. But two nice fixtures. So I'd have a full doubling team for 29, again, without taking any hits if I go over the strategy of just bringing in Jason Steele this week. But then would I really want to have Saka on the bench ahead of like a Botman or a Henry? Possibly not. So there's some food for thought. I probably won't make my final decisions until the press conferences tomorrow. So again, might be worth looking out for that. There's also potential weather news in Leeds where there has been snow that has occurred today being Thursday at the time of recording, Thursday the 9th of March to be precise. But the forecast indicates that come tomorrow on Friday, the sun comes out, and on Saturday, there's not too much forecast of snow. So potentially, the snow is going to melt a bit. It's a Premier League game. You'd expect the groundsmen to work their magic. It should be fine. But that could raise a question mark over the Leeds v Brighton game, which could put a question mark over their double, which then puts a question mark over how much you'd want to bring in their players. Now, back to the Brighton thing quick. Assuming both their games go ahead, which they probably will, most likely, but yeah, maybe keep a little eye out on the weather news before the deadline, before you lock in your moves. I think McAllister is arguably the safest Brighton captain this week if you want to captain someone, because he's got more routes to points. He's got the assists in him. He's got the goals in him with his more advanced role. He's got penalties. He's got direct free kicks. He's got some corners. Like he's got loads of routes to points. So you think over 2 games, he's surely going to get at least one attack in return. Matoma, I'm quite happy with captaining if I don't end up taking a hit from McAllister. There is a chance I take a hit to bring in McAllister for Odegaard, but then long term, with my FPL planner, it then leaves me with, I think, a squad of 9 for 28. So I have to take another hit to get a team of 11 out for 28. And then I'd have McAllister nicely for this week, but then when there's a blank in 32 potentially for Brighton, I'll have to probably take more hits. So it's like, is it really worth it? Probably not. Anyways, yeah, Captain McAllister would be my first choice for Brighton mid. Second, I'd say Matoma because he has been our talisman and he's been proving that he is scoring goals in crucial games. So McAllister, Matoma. Tony for Brentford obviously can't be overlooked. I think if you want to captain someone this week, it's either got to be Tony, McAllister, or Matoma. Unless you want to go for one of the single game week players, which to be honest is perfectly viable because Rashford at home Southampton, who has scored tonight again in the Europa League, Haaland v Palace, Kane v Forest, all very reasonable options. So you've got those single game week to consider as well. So yeah, that's kind of an overview of what I'm thinking for this week. Some tips, thinking about sort of captaincy options. Yeah, like I said, do look at your planners for future game weeks. Follow the likes of Ben Krellin and Lego Manes on Twitter, who have put together wonderful graphs like this, which tell you what fixtures are coming up, who's doubling, who's likely to double, who's likely to blank in future weeks. So you can have a rough idea of who to eye up for the game weeks. Definitely you need Brighton players this week. They've got 4 fantastic fixtures, a double this game week and then a double again in 29, providing you can navigate your way through 28 without too many issues. So definitely get at least 1 or 2 Brighton players in this week. Definitely get maybe a Brentford player in this week because they double in both these game weeks and they play in 28. Tony's the ideal one. If you're going to have one of them, get Tony. But yeah, it's well worth planning ahead with FPL.team, some of these fixture tickers, just to work out what is going on going forward. And outside of that, I probably don't have much else to say. I think it's going to be a week. I'm going to brace myself against those that have extra doublers. I hope you guys have a good week yourselves. I'll leave it there, a shorter one this week. And yeah, hopefully I'll be reviewing a green arrow next week with a bit more maybe in-depth discussion about, yeah, future gaming strategy and stuff. But for now, that's all I've got time for. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.